you've had already. And I'm trying to I tried to put together a presentation that will actually explain extremely big subject in a very, very short way. And if you have any questions, if you have any ideas on what we should expand on, please feel free to join at any time. Just quickly about the actual title of this lecture, if you will. I said I made it as a planning tools for data age. That's not completely accurate because information age and data age would actually fall into that information age. Started in the late 70s and it spans across 2010s or something like that. However, we are now in a completely different age, and we have to be ready in this interactive big data change that is upon us. That's actually helping as we speak, and it's happening as we speak now across the world. So let me begin with something that will be a bit of a throwback, if you will. So I will show you a few things from the past, how things were done 2,500 years ago, and I will try to illustrate how similar they are still today. However, what we have today is much more advanced, and we can do these things much more rapidly than it was done 2,500 years ago. As you can see here, I illustrated a ancient city of Miletus, which was made and designed by one of the first architects ever recorded, Hippodam, and he actually developed something that we call a Hippodamian plan, which is an orthogonal grid that allows for various planning advancements and urban design. I will not go through the details, obviously. I just put it there so you can Google and you can find more about it if you're interested. But more importantly, it's such a huge impact. It was such a huge impact on European design, and from that point on the world design of cities, and it's been executed throughout about 200 years. Having said all of that, imagine yourselves today thinking about cities, about design, about infrastructure, about politics, economics, everything that's involved in there, which is done in, let's say, several years. So you can basically shorten the process by, let's say, 198 years to get something done on this scale. Now cities are obviously much bigger, but it's something to think about. The next one, we are jumping now about 1,000 years ahead, and you can see a sketch that actually changed and defined the city of Rome, which was center of world civilization at that time, which was most advanced city in the world at the moment. And one of the popes, which was the head of the state and the head of the empire, would actually was planning the change in the city in a sense that he wanted to create certain number of focuses and focal points about where the city will grow and what will happen around these focal points. Then they will become connected and the city will grow in that sense. This is very important because obviously the planning process today is much different than it was before. However, the political and societal differences are also vastly different as well. And as you can see, the execution was made basically, the execution of the actual plan was made by one single decision. The Pope Sixtus V said, okay, I will bring these Egyptian obelisks and I will place them on these 5 points, and you will deliver everything that needs to be done on these places. And that was basically it. So it's a completely different system of democracy, or lack of one, and you can actually insist on learning more about it, just to make sure that you're on the right page when you're trying to develop a plan in today's time. What does that mean? That we have a lot of these obstacles that we call them, but they're basically mechanisms to control that everything falls in place so that no one will be left out. Economically, public health needs to be taken care of. All of these issues were then, at the time that I'm presenting here on this sketch, and at the time that Pope Sixtus did it, was very diminished in the sense of discussion. So he actually made the decision, and that was it. Moving forward, another few hundred years later, we are getting to another great city in Europe, which is also one of the templates for fantastic urban design and planning options. That Mr. Osman, he was the architect who was working for Napoleon during his emperor years in Paris. Now, this is very important to understand that there are different legal systems in place in Paris at that time, which means that you have a dictatorship, basically. You have an emperor on board, and none of the private property is essentially private. It is on paper, but if an emperor says, okay, we need to make a large avenue coming through these slums, as Mr. Osman have proposed, then that will happen regardless of whether it's your land, whether it's someone else's land or whatnot. So you can also compare two big issues here. One issue is London, who had a strong presence of legal entities and properties and strong sense of private property, which would be undemocratic and unthinkable of taking something away from you by force, at least legally, compared to Paris, where you had an emperor who could actually do that easily. Therefore, you have a fantastically planned and beautifully designed Paris, and you have a somewhat chaotic things done in London, which took, I don't know, 50, 60 years just to change several streets and, and prepare few spaces for, let's say, a square or something like that. But that's a different discussion. Let's move forward. But what I'm trying to tell you is that all of these cities from ancient Greeks through the Roman times and from Baroque era as well, we have very strong entities in power that actually made all these things happen, and they made it possible because of lack of democracy, lack of today's rules, if you will. So moving forward, you are jumping into the modern times where democracy obviously have developed. We are talking about the time between the two great wars, and there's this person, Le Corbusier, I'm sure that everyone knows about him, by trade a goldsmith, and basically he changed the world literally for every one of us. Even today, we have a lot of examples of copying him, trying to understand his work, trying to understand how he got to his ideas, and building on top of his ideas a way beyond what he actually considered that would be a basis for it. Having said all of that, his cities and planning were somewhat very strict, but also it was well thought through, and that's a very important bit here. So he was basically delivering something that hasn't happened for a very long time in the human history. He brought in well thought design process on a huge scale, such as this 3 million people city that you can see here. He actually approached the city like he would approach designing a home, which is a very difficult process to master and a very difficult thing to compensate in your head for, because it's a vast information pool that you have to comprehend and to deliver eventually. So I will leave it to you, if you will, to actually explore a little bit more about this if you don't have any information. But moving closer to today, we are switching now to getting into the tools for the actual executing these plans. As you can see on the bottom image here, the above image is the famous drawing of Canberra, and at the bottom image you can see the planners drawing by hand enormous plan for the city. And as you can see, it's a very romantic notion of developing a plan and a set of drawings. And how would you present something like that? We all went through that. All cities had that. And after the Second World War, this was very, very popular, and it was the only way that you can actually do that. Obviously, drawbacks of such an approach, you have to have enormous number of skilled people. You have to have enormous number of drafters, and the result was basically given on paper, and it would be displayed once or on one or two places, and everyone will need to go in and have a discussion, talk about it, and then you go into all the modifications and whatnot. So you go back and forth, and that took years, literally, for the drawing and for the actual execution of the plan. Moving a little bit forward, when I say a little bit, because this happens in the late 60s when the computers took over. As you can see on the top left image, that was one of the first CAD drawings ever done on a computer of a size of, I don't know, 3 square meters or something like that, which was fantastically innovative and advanced at the time. 50 years later, we had AutoCAD. AutoCAD would, you probably know all about that, and it brought us such a big change in ability to deliver your ideas and plans, and multiplying the plans and printing it out on our large scale printers and whatnot. So all of these issues contributed to the thought process of whatever is happening whilst you're trying to deliver the design, whilst you're trying to plan, whilst you're trying to do anything that you do. However, before, let's say 1980 or 1985, I would say, you had some digital help before that. And whatever you did digitally, you had to go through all other motions in order to bring the planning upwards, meaning that you have to have all the economics done by hand because there were no data collection systems. You had to have all those economically, political, economic, geospatial, residential, ethnic, or whatever other kind of data that you had to gather. You had to do it by hand and on foot, which was extremely lengthy and long process. So just to illustrate this point, in 1960s, when you're trying to collect data about the residents in some area, that usually takes about 3 or 4 years. Now, in a same size, I'm not talking about China or India, I'm talking about smaller developed Western countries, you do the same process in about a month or 2, which is huge leap forward because you can then do the data management better, you can do everything you needed to do, but more importantly, you can extract the data as you go. And that actually leads us to new horizons where we are moving towards and where we are at the moment. Not a lot of people are following the technology developments, but luckily I was actually lucky enough to be the ones at the forefront at some point. And I can tell you that there are solutions at the moment where you have an artificial intelligence actually helping develop tools for planners, for planning, and for the actual clients extracting the data to make planning available or even possible at some point. So moving along, what would be the consideration of planning, just to cover? Am I going too fast? I'm sorry, but I want to be rushing through all of this. If you have any questions, so if you can.
I think you're good.
Are we okay? I mean,
yeah,
are we good on time
nice.
as well? I don't want to take too much time. That's why I'm trying to move forward to today.
Yeah, I guess the pace is good. Everyone, if you want to just ask questions, feel free to jump in.
Okay. So considerations of planning would be, I will just read the stuff here and we can go a little bit point by point, but physical environment is something that we are actually trying to transform. We're trying to go into the physical environment and we're trying to do whatever needs to be done in order to enable social interactions and social environment to thrive. When that happens, social environment can be very, very tricky, but with today's technologies and today's big data ability to collect and to interpret that data, you can easily get all sorts of trends and all sorts of predictions that you can come with based on the past data that you collected before and modeling the future. You can actually model the future behaviors of various groups within your planning execution model. So that will obviously include the economic environment as well, which is basically inseparable. So, and you can also forward think in a sense that you can design for the future. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you're trying to forward think for about, or thinking forward for about 10 years or so. You need to think about 100 years or so, because 100 years is the actual, or 80 to 100 years would be the actual time frame where your actions today will be still in place. I will give you a smaller example just to make sure that we are on the same side. So basically, when you're designing a building, let's say a residential building of 12 floors, 12 levels, at some point you have, I don't know, 100 apartments, 120 apartments. That building will for sure stand there at least 60 years. That means that your design effort and your design achievement and everybody involved in that design achievement have made that space occupied for the next 60 years. But not only the lot that actually building is standing on, but the actual surrounding area too. Because if there's a, I don't know, a business area next to it, a park or a school or something like that, everything will be affected with the number of people living in that future building that will be standing there for the next 60 years. So, and whenever you come in with a new project next to it or in a very close vicinity of it, you will need to take into account what that building brings and what will change when you don't think of it as an important part of that area. Now, if you think of it as in a similar fashion on a huge scale, such as planning scale, let's say Sydney CBD or even further than that, Western Sydney or something like that, you can imagine how profound impact all of these issues will have for the next 100 years or even further than that. That's what I meant as with forward thinking, which also and that brings us to the next point, which also raises the issue of very important issue, which is preservation and protection. Preservation and protection will give us the cultural lineage backwards and forwards as well. Because if you plan for your plan to be forward-thinking and inclusive of heritage, of certain things that will happen in the future as well, then you can plan for the cultural development of your area, which is extremely important in a social environment as well, because nothing will keep your people in place, or it will keep them not in place in a negative sense, but that will keep them as a community if you don't offer them any cultural advancements. And that's precisely what as a planner should think of. And these researchers that you're trying to reach to, and the research that you will be providing, is basically just thinking about the cultural delivery for the future and how to include everything that happened before as well, to continue our civilization in that sense. And obviously now the best plans are always flexible and as I said, progressive in a sense that they need to involve a lot of other things and a lot of other issues covered. So, but being flexible is very important for the future deliveries, meaning that things will change. Most obvious example would be COVID-19. All the plans that were made 30 years ago immediately fell through this year in April, when we went all into a lockdown. That because it immediately meant that we don't need a public transport anymore. We can't be using roads that much. Air got cleaner in about 3 or 4 weeks. There were many pictures from India where you can see the before and after pictures where you have to see heavy haze from the smog in Delhi, and then 2 weeks after, clean, brisk air, everything was fantastic. So from one standpoint, it wasn't that bad. However, the lockdown causes great economic strain and economic stress and a social anxiety as well. So all of these plans never planned for something like that. Although there are ways how to think about that, and there are ways how to prevent at least some of the levels of such a huge impacts, like a natural disaster of large scale, pandemics, wars, and similar. So there are a few things that can be done, and that could be obviously discussed in a lengthy sessions later in your careers or later in our discussions. But getting back to the planning tools, now that we covered what needs to be covered with the planning actually assertions, so we need to get back to the planning tools. And what I will offer here is just to present you with something that will go from the lower level, or let's say least informative information, to the most informative and most useful stuff available at the moment and in the coming 5 or 6 years. So let's begin with satellite imagery. And I will just go through the list quickly just to give you an example or a hint what will happen in the next slides. So satellite imagery, local mapping tools, which is different. GIS software, which will include the previous 2 points as well. Data collection will just, an analysis will, I will talk to you about a little bit about the collection and what happens when you gather all these information. And then we're going to jump into smart cities, because smart cities is a lot of there are a lot of buzzwords, and I've noticed you had this fantastic lecture before a few days ago by a UTS professor about that. I actually enjoyed that, and it was very on point. Obviously the man knows his area very much, so I was very happy to see that. But I will get some more my input in that, and then we can jump into something more practical, which is interactive design tools and data management that can be easily obtained today, and future infrastructure and how to adapt urban environment, or how to be adapted to your urban environment using the tools that we already have. So let's begin with something very simple. When I say simple, I don't mean to diminish all the fantastic work these people have done to create those satellites and those cameras that are running and zooming about 250 kilometers above us or 500 kilometers above us. But you can actually buy today commercially, which was not possible 30, 40 years ago. You can commercially buy any of those images for a very reasonable amount, but what you have to count on is that there are limitations to those images. What you can see here is the North Arm Cove satellite imagery, but what you can see, there are different colors, different shades of it and whatnot. So that's precisely what I'm talking about. So you don't have a uniform access to those images, and they will be updated as we go along, meaning that some things will change, some things will not be changed, but what you can actually count on is to get some sort of a medium to low resolution of a certain space from a very, very, very big distance. Using those special cameras and software development, this is software that used to be used for developing these kind of images, you can actually enhance a lot. However, the biggest issue that you have here, you can't use, let's say, heat topography. That will actually give you the access to the data of where the water is, what's the underground water area, what's happening with the erosion of the shore and whatnot. So there are things that you can use, but they're not commercially available and not available very easily. So you can use them through various research facilities. You can, I don't know, get in partnership with the military or weather satellites and whatnot. But all these information requires a lot of work and very skilled work to be represented properly, so you can read them normally. You can read them in a sense that it would be useful to you and everybody else. So I would say also that there are fairly inconsistent results, although companies who are selling these information will tell you differently, but in my experience, some of these results are not very consistent with what's been happening due to the various weather conditions and all sorts of other stuff that's happening whilst taking these pictures. So moving forward, we have local mapping tools. These are completely different tools, although they look very, very similar. So these are tools that usually being done through an aerial photogrammetry or aerial photography, meaning that you have a special plane, or it's a regular plane with a special equipment on it, and you take pictures from a fairly low altitude. That actually gives you a fantastically high resolutions of imagery, which are completely geotagged, meaning that they are completely assessed and aligned against the actual terrain, which gives you also a very high precision of images. And also, very important issue here is that whilst you're doing that, you can gather many other forms of information, such as LiDAR images. LiDAR images or LiDAR models are, if someone is familiar with LiDAR, you can easily recognize where I'm going with this. You can basically create everything in 3D through a point cloud by simply flying over with a plane. It's not that simple to produce, but it's very simple to buy something or to get something from these companies, and it's very reasonable, and it's not very expensive at the moment. And but at the same time, depending on what you will doing with these models, whether you're a civil engineer, planning, a professional, or a council or a government, that you can actually use that data to overlap it with your existing knowledge of infrastructure and everything else that falls in place. I put in here two companies that are probably most known for these kind of imagery, MetroMap and NearMap. MetroMap actually is a business partner of mine, and they're very good at what they do. And they actually can provide any of that very easily. NearMap almost as the same, almost as good as they are.
Alen, Noah has
yes.
just mentioned that Elvis GIS website provides a lot of free data about topography. Like, if you would like to, if you have come across.
Yes, there are free websites as well. But what you need to be aware of that is that once you gather that free data, there's no validation of data as well. That's why it's free, because once they fly over, they produce the image, they leave it there sometimes for a couple of years. But these companies, I'm not pushing for the companies for you to buy their services. What I'm trying to say is that commercial viability of these companies depends on their ability to be, I would say, to be relevant. Meaning that they have to do this fairly quickly and fairly precisely in order to stay relevant for their clients. If I'm about to buy something from them, I will ask them when was the last imaging session done, and if it's been done, I don't know, longer than 6 months ago, then it's not of use, because many things has happened in the last 6 months, and I need to see that from a fairly low altitude and in a high resolution. So if they can't provide that, they're not viable business. So just keep that in mind when you're getting all these free data. That's very useful, and I'm getting for North Cove. Arm Cove. You can actually get all the data as well, because none of these companies probably will be flying there anytime soon if there's no interest in that.
Alan, in North Arm Cove, nothing has happened for the past 100 years. So,
any satellite imagery is up to date.
Image is good.
Okay.
So don't worry.
We have the satellite imagery up to date. Very good. So basically what I'm trying to say is that if there's any free data, that's fantastic, and you can actually use that, but make sure that you check when that data was collected. Otherwise, you can get stuck with some sort of unpredictable results, because you don't know what will happen. Sometimes I can tell you some things about the planning process. So when you're planning something and you extract the data from imagery, many times you can use the automatic tools that will, let's say, gather roads out of that. You all know when you apply for DAs or any other larger projects, you have to involve roads in that. All those roads will be already placed, and if you don't start digging or actually producing those roads on the actual terrain, and someone doesn't take a picture of it, they will not be including in the data that you collect either freely or from the government or similar. So that takes time to get into those data sets. So it's something that I'm talking too much about, but it should be just considered in a sense that you need to be aware of your data precision or the timing. Does that answer the question? to, I'm sorry, I missed who asked that question, but okay, it's probably.
Noah asked. Noah, is that clear?
No, there was no
Oh.
question. That was just a comment.
Just a
Don't
comment,
worry.
but yeah,
Just continue.
yeah.
Just continue.
Okay, anyways, moving on with planning tools, we're jumping into GIS software, which is basically geoinformation software. So that, what does that mean is that you're basically collecting all sorts of data, which I mentioned before, from satellite images or for low altitude flyovers, and that data needs to be presented somehow, meaning that you can create various layers of information and you can geotag them and show them one above each other, or you can turn them on and off as you feel that's necessary. As you can see on the images on the right-hand side of your screens, you can actually see what does that mean. However, this looks fantastic in a presentational sense, but in a practical sense, when you're trying to plan something, it may be less practical than you would actually think of, because once you try to unpack of the data what you can get, let's say I'll show you, I can switch, let me just switch my screen. I don't know how to do that, but let me try to do this. Share. If you switch your screen, if I switch my screen here, you can actually see this is online GIS system that's being used by government and by everybody else. For this particular map, it's a North Arm Cove. As you can see, there's a number of things that you can see, and there are a number of layers that you can turn on and off. All these layers have been populated fairly inconsistently, but at the same time, they depend on the policies, meaning that you have to be fairly skilled and fairly educated to understand all of the stuff that's actually being put in there, and most of the time you have to go and check them. That's why you have to apply for all the permits and everything that's happening in between, so you make sure that everything of public data is actually correct, meaning that you can use these tools to help yourself for a starting point, but be aware of the problems that may arise if you say, let's say, I don't know, REE1, you can actually see what does that mean. If you go to height of building here and turn on the additional controls, you can see, oh, boom, we can build what, who knows. So you have to go here and you have to track and study all of the systems on your own without
sorry,
much.
Alan, you actually, there is a separate one for legend that explains the colors.
No, I understand that there are.
Yeah, so
I was
also
trying to say.
It is important to understand it is government, and this is based on government legislation. So this actually tells you exactly what you can build and in which areas which zones apply to different areas. So I think that this is actually higher priority than other imagery and other stuff, because this is the law.
No. I was about to say that. So what I was trying to say is, in a comparison of GIS usage, GIS can deliver a lot of information, but more importantly, what you get from GIS is what you can rely on is the policy that actually policy and lawmakers are actually putting in there, so you can find out what's been applied to a certain area, and that's what you can count on. If you're trying to use that for your research and for your analysis in a spatial planning process, it would not be that useful as something else that you can find and you can reach on, because if you're trying to design something based on the information that you get here, you need to analyze the data first that you can get from these GIS systems, and then you can move forward, which is fine, which is great, and it's okay that we have them, and it's free, and it's a government tool. So by all means, run to it and do whatever you need to do and extract as much data as you can out of this. But what I was trying to say, and what I think Tatiana already gave the lecture about all of this is much more covered in her lecture, and you should actually if you're interested, obviously, you should take a look a deeper dive in all of these information systems, because you can learn really a lot. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not simple, and that's why you're becoming an expert. That's why you're trying to do all of that. All right. So I wasn't going to diminish or in any way say that GIS systems are not good. There are certain limitations, especially for students and for someone who is just starting, because most of the times, unless they're presented like this, which is a limited, it's a limited form of presentation. But if you have them done in a different way, I'll go back to the presentation now, if you wouldn't mind. Where do I go from here? Over there. So if we jump back here, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Was I referring back to my screen? So what I'm saying is that you can use the planning portal to find everything you need to do from a policy standpoint of view, from a planning point of view, to see which zones are available, what you can do, what heights are available. You can actually suggest changes if you have better ideas and whatnot. However, if you're trying to do this professionally, if you're trying to do this on a larger scale, where you have to actually produce the plan out of that, it's not operational. It's not something that you can use. You need to use something better than that. You have to move forward from there. All right, let's move forward then. Big data collection and analysis. Now, this is a big one, because in relation to what's happened with GIS and the policy making before that, in order to get any of these things, you need to collect the data. So that's a main driver of the planning process. Of any planning process, you need to collect the data to be able to understand better what you're trying to do. And once you get the data, once you analyze the given priorities or given interests, then you can start trying to resolve the issues. As Dan put it eloquently yesterday when we had a brief chat about all of this, it's important to understand that data and analysis are used to solve a problem, but you need to be able to define the problem first. So defining the problem is your biggest challenge first. So defining the problem of planning will then lead you to design, because design will then resolve the problem. But if you don't know what the problem is and how to ask the proper questions, that's not going to lead to proper design. So in that sense, big data collection and analysis is the key part for any design and any planning process. What I listed here is that digital data is something that's a big difference from 20, 30 years ago, where you gathered some information, but it took a long time to analyze it and to actually produce it properly. Now, with all these softwares like Salesforce, Primavera database, you have various other issues that you can actually use, and you can reach to even free tools which you can fill in and get the analysis out by your own constraint. Not to overcomplicate things, I'm trying to be as broad as possible, but let's give you an example. So you probably have heard about customer relation management softwares. So that's a CRM for short. That CRM means that you can actually put in all your data about the product that you're selling and every single person that you know that you can sell it to. However, what's the further ability is that you can set up a website, social media website, Instagram account, YouTube video. You can do all sorts of things, and they will be all connected to that CRM, and every information that you get from all those external places, they will go directly into the CRM and be directly interpreted for your interests, how to sell better. Same thing happens here. If we set up all sorts of platforms that are collecting data, how many people, how many cars, Are the cars only residential for residential use only? Are the cars for commercial use? What will happen here and there? So all these, if you put in sensors in the streets, if you put in sensors in I don't know, in lighting systems or in all sorts of places, what you can do, you can gather data. All the data needs to go into one place, under one dashboard, and you can then interpret it. And that interpretation will give you the question. The question then will lead to a problem, which then be resolved by your design. And that's analysis and that's the research that you're basically doing. So inform yourselves to the best of your ability how to learn about the spatial planning, zoning, policy making, energy distribution, traffic, interactive services, future proofing, residential services, payments, contracts, and so forth, so on and so forth. Because you have many, many, many options at your hands at the moment. What you can plan for is that world will be changing very, very fast once we cross a certain point in data collection. We're at the moment in the world at the moment that Google, Apple, Facebook, I don't know, a few other big tech companies, what they're trying to do is they're trying to collect as many data as possible, but completely without any discretion, in the sense that they're trying to collect all the data for themselves, how to sell you better advertisement and sell you products, which is very pedestrian way of thinking in a sense of development of the future. If you think of it as in a city-based Arm Cove and gather all that data from the sensors distributed throughout the future development, and getting all those informations coded through a blockchain technology, put it into smart contracts and smart payments, you can easily have your completely different economic and social structure in place in one local edition, which will then lead in turn in change of political achievements. Probably democracy will be a little bit better. You will get a little bit of a better understanding of how things can change and how you can directly influence your leaders and to give them proper information or your thoughts on how things should work in the place where you live and work, rather than wait for them to think of something after, I don't know, 10 years of misplaced ideas and whatnot. So just the sheer number of information, sheer data collection way will give you enormous advantages and huge savings across the board. So I will not bother you too much with all of this. If there are any questions with that, this is a vast subject, and I will be available for questions if you have any. So what I just said about the data collection and about how to interpret that data basically leads us to your next question, and that's a smart city, which basically should be the research that you're doing, and the actual result of your design would be a smart city, meaning that your research will be asking the proper question, and that question will be asked through smart cities. How do we go with better water quality? How do we allow for better public health? How do we allow for smarter transportation? Will we be using drones to fly over? How will we change the lighting in our I found this fantastic use of LED lighting, which was changed in San Francisco in one sense. What they had at the moment is they wired, I think it was 20 or 30 square kilometers of certain area of these LED lights. They're all connected to the central command of the city, which at the moment, what they have is only the information about whether the grid is working or whether some lamps are off and how much electricity they require to function. But at the same time, because it's an LED light and it's a completely programmable structure, you can use them to interact with various other sensors. So I'll give you an example. So let's say you have a traffic that's getting congested. The sensors will pick that up and that can actually be sent to the central command, which will then in turn change the color of the lights, which will then signal to all other drivers coming into the area, try to find an alternate route, or that could be actually indicated with other lights as well, to avoid congestions that will be forming ahead of you. Similar thing could be used with the drone deliveries and with the drones overall. So there are already attempts how to avoid the traffic in the sense that you sit in a drone and drive yourselves around. So you don't need to do that on a smaller scale, but you can imagine yourselves in the North Arm Cove. How can you implement all of the stuff that I just said? But imagine yourself in a sense that you live in your house, you work from your home, so you only thing you need is a high-speed internet and a sensors distributed to the city. Meaning that when you order something from, I don't know, Coles, which is not even in your area, the Coles truck can easily stop before North Arm Cove, unload all the packages, hook them up to the drones, and the drones will deliver that into your backyard, which will then reduce every single aspect of the environment on negative environmental impacts that we have at the moment. So these are the things that future will bring us, and it's bringing us at the moment. One of the biggest things that you can see in developing these ideas is the Dubai 2020 Expo, which was gloriously announced for this year, but due to obvious reasons, it will not happen this year, but it will happen next year, and the next 2 years they will be developing further and further. However, it's a fantastic spot which was a little bit forgotten because these architectural shows and these big expos got scrapped back in the 80s, but people from Dubai are trying to get that back in a sense to bring us to the future, bring us back to what Americans had in the 60s. Improvement, how to live, what to do, and how to become better and whatnot. This is what's been trying to do at the moment, but most of the stuff that I'm talking about is available at the moment as we speak. It's further developed. It's some of the stuff, it's already in the prototyping development. But at the same time, you can most of these things can be developed and can be implemented on a larger scale. And that's basically. I will stop here because I don't want to digress too much, and we're already talking long about all of this. So let's move forward into something that's fairly interesting, and I think it's quite on the spot and on the point what we're talking about here. Interactive design tools and data management. There are several companies across the world that are trying to do something that we call a generative design in one go. However, there's a company here in Sydney, developed by Sydney based, they're Sydney-born boys, I know them, and they're basically developed something from scratch. Which was very, very complicated thing to do, but they never gave up, and it's good they haven't. So let me list some of the things that are very interesting. What you can see on the top right-hand picture, that's a Land Checker. That's a company also owned and operated from Australia. It's not available across the entire nation. It's available only in 2 states, and I think New South Wales is coming up, so that would be 3. And that Land Checker allows you to actually interactively check all the plans and all the legislation for a certain lot online in real time. Meaning that you log in and you want to check a certain lot which may actually contain several other lots, and you can check how tall you can build there, what you want to do, what kind of local environmental plan is in place for that spot, what do you need to check, how much does it cost to buy any of these houses or something like that. So there are many information that you can actually gather from them interactively and most importantly in real time online without doing any of the work that we mentioned in previous discussions on the previous slides. So, and they're already including the satellite image, low altitude aerial imagery, and all that's already begun. So now what they're doing, they're enriching the imagery and they're enriching all the data with their spectacular graphics and analysis through their system. One step further is Archistar. That's a company that I mentioned before. So what these guys did, they're basically architects, and they have developed similar things as Land Checker have done. However, they added a certain layer that's allowing you to generate designs based on your input, which then provides fantastic tools for amateur or professional developers, real estate developers. Meaning that if you want to buy a lot and you're trying to plan for something, it's very expensive to do that on your own without any knowledge of it. But these tools actually putting you in the driver's seat. So you have a few $1 million lying around and you want to do something with it. You don't know what to do. So instead of paying all the lawyers or the architects, development managers and whatnot along the process, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to understand better what you need to do. And then in the end, you say, okay, I will not buy this land because it's not a viable project. So that will burn a bit. So let's not do that. So what you can do, you can actually use Archistar parametric design generator. You can pick few spots in the city that you find interesting. You can check the prices as well. What was the surrounding area of the latest purchases? You can then project somewhat the cost of the land. And then you can do actually, what you can do, you can apply the inputs that you can find from the land environment plans, and you can easily see what can be built over there. As you can see on the lower picture down there, you can actually, this is the computer generated, one of the options of computer generated building that can be built on a certain area, what a certain developer wishes to make. But not only that, that 3D model is completely analytical. So that will give you the estimated price of, estimated cost of building. That will give you estimated cost of purchasing the land, and it will give you estimated revenue from selling all the apartments inside. Obviously, these tools are not perfect. It's not something that nothing can at the moment replace architects, and nothing at the moment can replace skilled planners. However, this is something that you can use just to get your research done properly. So you don't just take out the numbers out of the universe. You can easily go in there, check everything you need to check. Okay, now I know what I need to do. Let me ask you a few important questions, and we can go forward with that. So I will move forward. If there are any further questions, I'll be happy to answer them as well. And now we're moving to the actual last stage of the entire process, because all the projects that we're working on need to be commercially viable. And in order to success as a planner, you need to be able to achieve commercial and a social success as well. So that means that people will love what you did and they want to stay in that area. There are a few developments which are very, very cool, which are very good, but later on, after a while, if you don't maintain them properly, if you don't have that vibe in it kept running, they will also die off. What I'm trying to point out here is that it's not easy to be a planner, and it's not easy to be a successful planner. All these tools will give you the ability to be successful in what you do. The last one that I'm showing you here is what my company does, which we come at the latest stage. So basically, when you're finished with all the planning, when you've done everything that needs to be done, and you're trying to sell it or rent it or actually present it to the customers or to the governments, wherever you want to do that, then you need to do that in the best possible way, in a sense that your customers globally can take a look at your project and they can buy it online, or they can contact someone who will be buying for them online. Why is that important? Because at the moment, what you can see with everybody in the market, you will just get floor plans, few images, and I will need you now to transfer 10% of $1.1 million for the apartment, and then you can wait for 2.5 years for, God willingly, everything will be finished. However, that's not the only way how to do that, because there are lots of information that we can gather, that we can put up front, and I will show you. I will just switch briefly my screen to the interactive part of this thing, so you can actually see what it looks like when you're using it directly. So what you can imagine yourself trying to rent out an apartment, and you get to see the building like this, and you can turn on and off available units. You can see what the building looks like. Obviously, we can zoom in and out, but turn on the units which are available, and let's interact with them. So let's say click here. Okay, I'm looking at the unit which is on 23rd floor. I want to see the interior, which I can go in, enjoy yourself, see the apartment. This is the actual apartment of this building that's being sold. What I want to do, okay, we have another room here. I will be quick with this, don't worry. And once we go into another room, we can see where will I be living. But more importantly, you can go outside and you can actually take a look at the actual view, in this case from an unbuilt property. So this property will be built in about 1.5 years from now, and you can see all the views before you buy the property. Not only that, but you can see everything else. So you can see the floor plans, you can get all the data that needs to be presented and whatnot. And this is what I meant when I said you have to take advantage of your ability to share every to basically use whatever you can use to achieve best results with the data and the tools that you have at your disposal. And this is not the future that I'm talking about. This is only things that are available already now, but you just maybe not heard of them immediately because they are so new. And then the last thing is basically the final word, and you can read what I put there because it's very simple. Planning and research is the core of your progress. As much research and as much knowledge you can put in your head, that will actually lead you to the best possible results. There is no unuseful knowledge, as they would say. Whatever book you can get your hands on, read it. Whatever architectural thing you can learn about, read it, learn about it. If you want to learn about construction, that's why I told you in my short bio over there that I've built some apartments, and then I built something else here in Barangaroo, but also I've designed hundreds of buildings and hundreds of houses and all whatnot. As you can see from my professional website here, you can actually see that I'm now in marketing and sales as well. Why is that important? Because all these things in the process, as we go along, they're all connected, and they're all connected on a very, very high level and on a basic level, and that's where you come in. So your research and your problem solving will basically give us this future that we're all talking and we're all looking forward to it. So having said all of this, you can reach me at my email if you want to have some further discussions, if you need any help, or if you need any of the links that I can help you with. But overall, I think this is it.